All right. Are we on?
We are framed.
We are framed. It wasn't me. In the iconic words of Shaggy. Do you know I had drinks with Shaggy once? Have I ever told you that story?
Shaggy, or
Shaggy.
Scooby-Doo Shaggy?
No, Shaggy. not the Shaggy. Shaggy. The what do you call him?
I don't call him.
What is he? What is his genre? It's kind of... What is his genre?
Pop? Country pop, something
Not
like that.
Country. It's kind of almost reggae at times.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't me.
Didn't he sing some Afrikaner
definitely
stuff?
not.
No?
I don't think you know who Shaggy is.
Shaggy with the little...
No.
No?
Shaggy's from like the 90s going into the 2000s.
Oh, well.
He sang It Wasn't Me, Baby Bombastic, It's a Fantastic.
I was a kid.
You weren't even born, probably. Anyway, in 2005, I think. I don't know. It was when I first met my wife. And
Does your wife know this?
Yeah, she and I went for drinks with Shaggy and a
Listen up, kids.
Listen up, kids. He took a liking to a friend of ours who was, a young woman at the time, and he asked her out, but she was too afraid, I suppose, to go on a drinks date with this massive superstar, which he was at the time. So she asked us to go. So we sat there very awkwardly in the bar of the Hilton Hotel in Durban, having drinks with Shaggy and his large bodyguards. It's an interesting tale.
Well, you're a bodybuilder, so I'm sure you were pretty big at that time as well, or you hadn't started working out.
No, I was actually. I was fairly substantial in myself.
Fairly substantial.
Substantial. That's 20 years ago. So,
Well, that's history.
That's history.
That's history right there.
There we go. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, children, that was our lesson for the day. Okay, so what are we chatting about today? We're going to talk about civil rights.
Civil rights movement.
Because we managed to avoid that one so far for some reason.
It wasn't a deliberate plot.
No, it wasn't a deliberate plot at all.
Yeah, we've been recording in accordance to what the metrics need
at the time.
Yeah, at the time, yeah. And we're just backtracking to topics we should have started with.
Yeah. So tell us about the civil rights movement.
So America, 50s, but mainly 60s, into the 70s. Well, that's Black Power. We tend to focus on Black Power.
The latter part, yeah.
Yeah. Jim Crow America, segregationist laws.
It's a good place to start. Why? Why was the South? Because obviously it's a movement in the South. So why is it in the South? Let's start there.
Well, the South in particular would have been most segregated. Jim Crow laws were pretty reinforced in the South.
Jim Crow laws are a legacy of slavery and
yes. So essentially, what you see is a continuum of that era in U.S. political, social, economic history, and the South would have had quite a deep saturation of that culture. I call it a culture because there's the legislation side of it. And by the way, America at this particular point, so 50s onwards, was a constitutional democracy. It's been for a very long time. But you essentially have various states in the South with very segregationist laws. Practices. You have extremist groups as well, the Ku Klux Klan. And what you essentially have is a growing discontent amongst African American communities, essentially saying, if the Constitution provides that we are equal citizens, we're entitled to decent housing, decent education, human rights should also apply to us, then why is it that in southern states these basic constitutional rights have not been effected?
Civil rights.
Civil rights, yes. Why can't we vote? And so you see, is it 50, 54, or 57, 54?
54, you're talking about the Supreme Court ruling Brown versus Board.
Yes. But I'm particularly interested in Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
So Rosa Parks is
Well, the Montgomery bus boycott, so that's 55 into 56.
Yes. So I'm particularly interested in Rosa Parks. We don't normally assess civil rights movement from the 50s, unless the topic does allow
Very
for it.
often, Little Rock, 57. That's
I'm thinking civil rights is in essays.
yeah.
It is currently
Yeah.
source-based at the moment,
The essay, which it should have been this year but wasn't, is 60 to 65.
Yeah, source-based will have Little Rock.
Anything from 54, Supreme
Yes,
Court ruling,
yes.
Brown versus Board of
Yeah.
Education. That's basically the Supreme Court ruling on equal education, so desegregation in all schools.
Yes.
Which is what Little Rock in 57 is the experiment all about.
Yeah.
But Parks, Montgomery bus boycott.
Yes, and you essentially see this growing sentiment of challenging the status quo. Essentially demanding what the Constitution already provides for all Americans, the right to vote. Access to better education, essentially, which means desegregation of schools and various public amenities. And what the civil rights movement essentially is it's that demand of for civil rights, and it manifests in different shapes and forms. It's sit-ins, it's boycotts, it's media. So that documentation of the various injustices that African Americans had suffered in the U.S., just purely on the basis of them being deprived of basic civil rights, I should put it, Yeah,
I think it's worth jumping a little bit back just to identify the kind of the reason. You touched on it, but obviously the South had been the slave region, the plantations, because it's important that they understand the context of this. So being the plantation lands, the Southern, the whole Civil War was largely fought over slavery, the abolition of slavery, and so that attitude never really left.
It's a very interesting thing. Just while you're on that point, with my grade 9s in particular, it's a question that one of my kids actually asked on apartheid though. So same period, same time frame actually. The question of apartheid being legislation, and that ended in 1994. But whatever happened to this perception of superiority versus inferiority, where did that go? And Trevor Noah says something very interesting. He says he's visited different countries and has interacted with various. Okay, this is a bit of a tangent.
It's fine. That's what we do.
He's interacted with South Africans of all walks of life, and some left the country way back then. But he says he's never met anyone who claims that they miss that particular regime, So we know the laws changed, and democracy was ushered in, but where did the sentiment go? Where were those people? Where are those people who felt that an oppressive segregationist style of governance works? Suddenly it seems as if they had disappeared. And what we see in America is a bit interesting, in the 50s and 60s, because legislation had changed. Yes, America is a democracy, there's a constitution, but to your point, the sentiment is clearly there, it's present, and it's very bold. It almost seems like it's law. Well, law enforcement would have played a part in terms of keeping that superiority, white supremacy sentiment alive.
I think South Africa and America are probably a little different that way. I would argue that a lot of the sentiment went to Australia in 1994 onwards. All you have to watch those 1990s rugby matches in the Perth Stadium with the old South African flags waving right through the 90s. But a lot of it's still here, and in America, a lot of it was still there. When you change laws, you don't change sentiment.
You don't change sentiment.
It's not a that's it. We're done. Everyone's happy. So you mentioned voting rights. Interestingly, so 1865, abolition of slavery, Lincoln. The Ku Klux Klan formed the very next year, 1866, pretty much as a reaction to that, the white supremacy group. I believe it was 1867, I stand to be correct on that, but at that point, a lot of rights were given to free slaves, to African Americans, and voting was one of them.
Yes.
They weren't not allowed to vote. The problem that we then investigate is the fact that they had such restrictions in their voting registration. So when they could register, what day of the week, what times, literacy tests, that sort of thing, which no one else had to do. And then obviously facing protests when they did it. And so, you ended up with 1%, 2% of the African Americans in those southern states actually registering to vote. So that becomes the major issue. So I think, obviously, as you said, the Jim Crow laws, the black codes of those basically were trying, those southern states trying to retain their supremacy, which took away civil rights. And that's why the civil rights is in the southern states. I would say, let's look at the 50s events, 1954, as we said, Brown versus Board of Education. It's key because, like you said, the civil rights movement is trying to say, well, first of all, the Constitution says all men are born free and equal. There's no subtext that says unless you're African American. They probably did argue that they were foreigners, they were brought into the country as slaves, and so they had no rights. So there's that, and then there's the Supreme Court ruling, and the Supreme Court is the highest court in America. So, bearing in mind that America is divided into 50 states, which have a level of autonomy.
Yes.
They are answerable to a federal government, but we can see it in current day politics. It's difficult to get things done. So when governors of those states insist on their laws, it's very hard to change that. So the Supreme Court ruling becomes a point of it becomes the benchmark for the civil rights movement, whereas your governors in the South are poo-pooing it. They're refusing it, and then that leads to various incidents and clashes. So I think that when you look at 1954, you've got to look at 1957 before you look at 1955 and 6, because Little Rock, Central High, Arkansas, is the school that tries to experiment, call it an experiment, by bringing in these young kids, the Little Rock 9. It's those 9 that end up there, and obviously that leads to all sorts of issues.
And so for the matrix, a very common question that I've seen, we certainly test this pretty often, is this interrogation of integration. So you have this standout between those who are saying that the Supreme Court is essentially forcing Americans to just gather along, and that highlights the sentiments that we spoke about earlier, that we have cultural differences, and why are we therefore being forced to embrace each other, and Little Rock just highlights that pretty well, the Little Rock incident. And I mean, these are kids, but some of the measures that were taken to prevent them from entering the school, it's a bit extreme if you think about it, and just this sentiment of preserving white purity, almost as if the welcoming of various racial groups, African Americans into all Black Americans into their schooling system is equivalent to racial suicide.
Which we encounter in Nazi Germany and South Africa. It's an ongoing concept.
So I think that's important to think about, since this is a source-based topic, and so you do get those type of sources which require an interrogation of those sentiments. So the whole issue of integration versus segregation, brutality, and obviously you see the role of media as well. I teach it with those themes in mind. I will place a bit of emphasis on the segregation portion of it. I will look at the issues around integration. I will look at the brutality in the name of defending, this separateness of various races, and then we will look at the peaceful element of civil rights. So satyagraha, Mahatma Gandhi.
Yes. You said that quite well, I think.
I try.
Satyagraha.
Satyabu. And then obviously the role of media. So the documentation of this that. Oh, and the constitutionality of what the civil rights movement is advocating for. So my tip to the matrix would be break it down in those themes, right? So segregation, integration, constitution, the brutality, peaceful resistance, and then look at the role of media, because each and every single source that they get is essentially evaluating if they understand these concepts about the civil rights movement.
Or should, at least.
Or should, yes.
So go back to, you talk about the brutality and the role of media. So let's investigate Little Rock a little bit more. So obviously the Little Rock 9 are meant to pitch up for school at the start of the summer of 57, I suppose. And only little Elizabeth Eckford arrives because, I forget the exact story, but she and her family had not got the message saying that there were protests and they shouldn't come. So she arrives on the bus to a mob of angry parents who don't want this, essentially racial suicide, risking having a 15-year-old African-American child in their class could ruin them forever. And so she's confronted by this, but strangely seems quite calm, according to the plethora of photographs that we have on that. Heads towards the school, notices that the National Guard, the Arkansas? Yeah, it is Arkansas. National Guard is surrounding Central High, the school that she's meant to be integrating into, thinking that they're going to help her and save her. And then obviously when she arrives at one point, they raise their arms, their guns, and bar her from entering. Carries on walking, tries again, and then she realizes they're actually there to prevent her from entering. And then you see all these pictures, these very graphic pictures of an angry mob kind of marching behind her, spitting fury, behind her neck. And as you say, like this concept of a 15-year-old little girl, the threat that she poses that requires the National Guard and a mob to prevent her entry.
But also her naivety. This is a kid. This is a 15-year-old. She's not politically literate, and she shouldn't. For her it was just going to be a normal day of school, new school, but the other side feels threatened.
They're envisioning, as you said, racial suicide. Eventually. So the investigation of that. The very fact that beyond that, she was integrated, as were the others eventually, and for a year spent, because President Eisenhower had then sent the paratroopers and whatnot to force the National Guard to do the bidding of the federal government, and so it all happened, integration, but very begrudgingly, very resentfully, and eventually the governor, I think it was Orville Faubus at the time, I should forget now, closed down the schools for the next year. He said, right, we'll just cut our noses off to spite our faces. A little odd. There was, the point is there was massive resistance despite a Supreme Court ruling. That the attitude of the South had not changed.
And that's one of the interesting reoccurring themes with the civil rights movement. And we see this throughout, deep into the 60s as well, with your bus boycotts and, desegregation of buses, freedom rides and all of that. This theme of having certain legislation passed to enforce desegregation, but also having resistance, whether from law enforcement, whether from governors, just refusing to enforce those laws. I view the civil rights movement as an overall success, but I do place a bit of emphasis on that theme of taking 2 steps forward, so in terms of progress and 1 step back, in terms of going back to test if these newly passed laws actually will be honored. So schools are desegregated, but I still can't access schools as Elizabeth.
Yeah, it's it's definitely a period where I mean, that's what leads into the Black Power movement. You know, when we do look at that next, that concept of, you've got paper change, but you don't have actual change. I mean, why does the Black Power movement happen? It's the fact that there isn't any real change, certainly in certain areas. So I mean, let's then go back a year to 55, 56. I think it was 13 months long, the Montgomery bus boycott.
Oh, yeah.
You said Rosa Parks. She's kind of the spark, NAACP. That's one of the earliest federations conference that essentially stood for African Americans' rights. And so, she sparks the Montgomery bus boycott, her deliberate refusal to stand for a white man. And again, she's doing it deliberately to test the laws or to draw attention. It's a planned protest, peaceful protest. And again, you mentioned that earlier, all of these are peaceful protests.
Yes, yeah.
Satyagraha is the key word here, peaceful protest, non-violence. And this is where King gets pulled into it.
Yeah.
So in protest, he's drawn in as a young minister, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., and his mission is to solve this crisis through peaceful motivations, through peaceful protest.
Yeah.
And he's obviously a big fan of Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
And he follows that concept, that ideology of Satyagraha, which is, what does it really mean? It means peace and tolerance.
Yeah.
Loving. I mean, he very, very famously says, according to the Bible, you must love thy neighbor, but you don't have to like them. That's his whole concept. So what does a bus boycott do? It means that you don't use the bus.
Yeah.
You carpool, you cycle, you walk, you do whatever you can, but you don't use the bus. And that becomes not so much a media sensation at this point, but an economic problem. So, boycotts mean you don't use it, therefore they lose income.
Which could also mean that, businessmen who could fairly be influential, now they become another layer of a voice that says, change this, because you are striking at a position that hurts the most. You're striking at their wallet.
Yeah, exactly.
So perhaps they could then lobby government and say, hey man, let's perhaps pass laws that do indeed favor ourselves and our clients in this particular case.
It's interesting actually, because now we're teaching Afrikaner nationalism in grade 11, and you look at that. I mean, like, why did Smuts essentially lose the 48 election to the apartheid government? Because he did that. Because he, as a sound of mind man, saw the economic need for less segregation and more integration and better pay for African workers here, because it's South Africa. And ultimately that lost him the rural vote, which carried more seats in parliament. And so you see this happening in the South. The attempt to change laws through an easing of segregation, or in this case, a financial, thing. You're trying to get them to change their ways, and Smuts was kind of motivated by industry and economy. He wanted change based on the economy. Anyway,
it's a bit difficult to grapple between those two, because it's economics versus identity, preservation of that identity, whatever it is, whether it's toxic or not, whether it's nationalism or whatnot. Do we want a booming, successful economy, which also comes with desegregation? Or do we want to keep segregated, mess up the economy, but preserve that identity? I still see that around the world, even till this day, actually.
There's got to be a happy medium somewhere in there. So anyway, the Montgomery bus boycott is the spark. It brings Martin Luther King into the play. the economic thing. It's successful. So what they would usually, if it's an essay, certainly, but even in a source-based, you would look at the small successes of each event. In this case, what happens? It forces the law to change. In the South, the southern states, there's desegregation of buses. It actually achieves by 1956 desegregation of buses. That is then revisited 1961 with the Freedom Rides.
Yes.
Let's do this chronologically. 1960. 1960 is your first sit-ins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so that's kind of like now you're looking at your forms of protest.
Yes. Yeah.
As opposed to boycotts and whatever. You're looking at your marches, your sit-ins, your freedom rides, those various forms of protest. So 1960, first sit-in, the 4 young African-American students who sit in the Woolworths, North Carolina, Woolies, good old Woolies. Woolies has been caught up in a few controversies over time. There was a recent-ish one about 10 or 12 years ago. Anyway, they sit in the Woolworths cafeteria, and they request service peacefully.
Yes.
Knowing, and this is the interesting point, knowing that they will be abused, knowing that will happen, they call the media.
Yeah.
So the media is there and prepped. So, it's antagonistic in a sense. It's not violent at all. It's peaceful, but there is an antagonism. It's provoking the violence because they will request. They won't respond to, anger. They won't curse back at them. They won't throw a punch. But they know that's going to frustrate these people, and these people are going to react violently, and then the cameras are going to catch that. So the media becomes the key here.
Yeah.
Which then, essentially garners sympathy from society because you are seeing the authorities and the locals abusing people who are peaceful.
Yeah. And the appeal is to different races, by the way. It's not just to other African American communities. That's perhaps one of the interesting strategies deployed by King and various leaders in the civil rights movement is that the very peaceful approach that they adopt would have made this fight for civil rights appealing. Even to those who weren't necessarily excluded from, having these civil rights. So it would have been easier for a white person in America to actually join in, so that solidarity, marching together, condemning these acts of aggression, and we can contrast that with the Black Power movement, for example, where the Black Panthers would endorse something like taking up arms, not to go and provoke, police, law enforcement, but for self-defense.
Wow, they did go and provoke the police at the police stations, 100% they did. I mean, they literally marched on the doorsteps of police stations.
Oh man! Well, self-defense. And I would think twice. Once there are guns involved, there's going to be casualties. And so I'm all for the cause. We are marching for independence. We are marching for civil rights, but rifles. So
well, that's a big issue of the Black Power movement, which is often a question that's raised, but we'll get to that later. I think it's interesting. I mean, that first sit-in is the 4 African American students, but then it catches on very quickly. Remember, King doesn't organize that. King's not involved in that. These guys do their own thing. They then form in, I think it was April, because that was February of 1960 in North Carolina, and then in April of 1960, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the SNCC, is formed, and then they start organizing lots of sit-ins around that carry on right through, the whole protest movement, and that's mixed, and then obviously there's an inspiration from King and his whole influence that comes through on that. Are we having issues with our...
No, we're just 30 minutes in.
That's fine. We're good. This can be a slightly longer one. I don't think it warrants two episodes. So the sit-ins are pivotal and become a commonly used protest method, form of protest. It's interesting because they also become more than just cafeteria sit-ins. They become wade-ins in public pools, kneel-ins in public churches. I mean, you name it, whatever it is, they'll do it. Kneel-ins in the public churches. So it becomes a common form of peaceful protest. It's successful in a short range. Where the Woolworths cafeterias and many cafeterias, I think it was across 9 cities, actually desegregated. So now you got buses desegregated, you've got cafeterias that are desegregated. So it's little steps, it's baby steps in this process. And then that brings us to 61, freedom rides.
Yeah. So freedom rides. So again, just carrying on the desegregation of buses, but again, have to test the effectiveness of desegregationist laws, and so you have freedom riders riding these desegregated buses across various states,
and again mixed.
Yes, mixed, and I think perhaps the highlight of freedom rides is the fact that they then get attacked. KKK.
Yeah. And again, that's that brutality, media, sympathy.
Yeah. But you also have this element of law enforcement. It is said that law enforcement would stand by about 15 minutes, give or take, and just look on as buses are being torched. So by law, they should intervene. Buses are desegregated. They shouldn't be condoning, the act of violent groups like the Ku Klux Klan. But they stand by and they actually watch, which then highlights this, again, going back to what I said earlier on about 2 steps forward and 1 step back, is that whilst desegregationist laws had been won by the civil rights movement, but the implementation of them was still a bigger question that had to be answered, and obviously giving further justification for the formation of something like the Black Power movement later on.
Yeah, it certainly shows a stubbornness from the South. I mean, if we even look at integration in schools or desegregation in schools, up to 1972. They're still fighting that. There's still schools that refuse to do that. I mean, there are many cases of that, and and that's 18 years after the Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah.
So they weren't changing their attitudes too quickly. Yeah. So I mean, the freedom rides, you said it. They torching those buses which came down from Washington, which is technically in the north, right down into Alabama and all those places, confronted by Ku Klux Klan, torching the buses. And it's that same cycle. It's a peaceful protest. They're confronted by brutality. There's media coverage, very famous pictures of the burnt-out buses, authorities ignoring it, and then the media. And the media creates the sympathy from the public. The public, even... I mean, you can relate this to many things. Like, let's look at Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. The death camps were not public knowledge. That, in fact, was hidden. It was very confidential. The death camps, the Holocaust itself. Even families of death camp officers weren't aware of it. They weren't supposed to be aware of it. Why? Because most people, probably as racist as they might be, as prejudiced as they might be in whatever aspect, generally are put off by murder, brutality, that sort of thing. And so when the media in the South shows the burning of buses and innocent people being beaten and whatever, that creates a reaction of sympathy, regardless, even some racist people, but obviously particularly African Americans and moderate whites, people in the North, etc. It just creates a lot more pressure on that, forcing change, which it does. Again, Robert Kennedy Jr. at this time is the Secretary of State. He is he Secretary of State at that point? Because he was the oh gosh, I always forget the title.
We'll put it down there.
Yeah, the Department of Justice person. It's going to annoy me now. There, yes. Anyway, he did hold that position, and then he held Secretary of State position, whatever capacity it was at the time. Robert Kennedy is obviously current. Robert Kennedy Jr.'s father, brother of JFK, John F. Kennedy at the time. And he got the ICC, which also stands for the something or other interstate commerce, something, whatever it is. But the body, the organization in charge of things like that. And so they again made it illegal to discriminate on interstate buses, which it should have been already by the desegregation of buses. But so they sort of amended that, and that became enforced as far as they can enforce it. Right. 63.
What's 63?
63 is a big year. 63 is two major issues. Birmingham
campaign.
And then Washington, March in Washington.
Where's Selma?
Selma's later, 65.
Selma is later, yeah.
So Birmingham would be our next step. That's the campaign, which involves the Children's Crusade, the big march, the extreme violence. That media is a huge part of it. That's so pivotal. It's often a focus point in the exams because it's the point where JFK actually essentially announces the Civil Rights Bill, because he's so shocked and horrified by the brutality towards the school children, the Children's Crusade. So what is that one all about? It's the first major march, the Children's Crusade. It's technically about jobs, economics in Birmingham. It's Birmingham because Birmingham is the hub of the Ku Klux Klan, of racism. It's considered it's Alabama, capital of Alabama, I think, and Kennedy and a number of others get involved in that because they want to point out, and again, media, which has a huge effect. They want to point out the discrimination in that, particularly to do with employment, as I said, jobs and that. And so, boycotting the businesses, so that they are forced to essentially, I suppose, reconsider their hiring regulations, sit-ins as well, and march. And all of that is actually very successful, even the first parts, because it does get the local municipal laws changed. It even gets sort of segregation signs changed, that sort of thing. The march is the key, because the Children's Crusade is what brings up... What are we at? That's fine. We've done 46 before. Relax. We've got this and two more.
Sure.
The Children's Crusade is what results in the brutality, the fire hoses, and again, there's pictures and film of that happening. The police dogs attacking the students. A fire hose, people think, wow, it's a hose. It's not a garden hose. You can see pictures of kind of lighter firefighters learning on those things and getting flicked around like a rag doll. That hits you hard enough, you smash your head on something concrete, you can die.
Yeah, true.
So it's brutality, and obviously the dogs being set on the kids is certainly brutality. And JFK sees this. He watches this. He's outraged by it. And then he goes on television and he makes his announcement that this cannot be happening in America at this time, 1963. And he's going to pass a bill, and that bill is the Civil Rights Bill, which is obviously the key. It's the biggest, it's the biggest act that is passed in 1964. So the Birmingham campaign is massive. It's such an important point that is often a major focus. Understanding all that happened.
Why does Kennedy go on TV?
Yes,
that's one of the questions. Or around that theme of Kennedy going onto TV, this declaration for the whole country to know. And then fast forward a little bit, because that was April to June or July, I think it was, went for a few months. And then fast forward to August 28th, 1963,
the March on Washington, the Lincoln Memorial.
Yeah.
And again, such a key point because it's the biggest march. It's in the north. It's not in the south.
Yeah.
It's a peaceful march, but it's not. It's not a. There's not that threat of the South and protests and being beaten and all that. It's just publicity.
Yeah.
It's outright publicity. There's arguments of how many, but anywhere from 200 to 400,000 people. You look at those pictures, that film of them, people in the trees, people in the in the street lights, people in just surrounding the Washington spire, the memorial thing. Just everywhere. It's just people everywhere, and they're all races. Everyone's colors, all creeds, all colors, and obviously it's very media oriented. There's hundreds of cameras everywhere, and King makes the most famous speech probably of the 20th century. I have a dream.
Yeah,
and that has such an impact. And then the signing of the agreements made. After that, to sign the Civil Rights Act.
Yeah. I can imagine that such a huge a march would have signified that it's not America versus a minority group; it's particular groups, versus others. It's not necessarily that America is anti. Because I think. When you look at the history of segregationist America, it does appear, or it can be construed as America was discriminative, but having so many people of different walks just joining hands and King delivering that I have a dream speech, it sort of sways public sentiment that this is actually not an America versus African Americans battle, but this is extremists, nationalists versus an America that has consensus. In terms of what an American society should look like.
I think you're right. And then finally, 22nd of November, assassination of poor old Kennedy, first of a few Kennedys. And then, without skipping over 64, there is the Freedom Summer. I've never seen an exam based on the Freedom Summer. Just very briefly, young African Americans coming down from the north to the southern states to promote education, black heritage, African heritage, and also educate them on their right to register to vote. And they did make a difference. They did push voting registration up quite a lot in certain areas. And some argue that contributed to the passing of the Civil Rights Bill, which became the Civil Rights Act. And then, because you're worried about the time, let's finish off with the Selma Montgomery marches very quickly.
All right.
Are we about to die off? Is the battery about to?
No, we're not dying off.
Okay. The Selma Montgomery march. I mean, first March, 7th of March. Bloody Sunday. Obviously, on a Sunday, they try to march from Selma to Montgomery. To advocate for the Voting Rights Amendment Act, to basically get an easier passage to registration for voting. Beaten, mounted horses, or should I say, police on horses, batons, cattle prods, the whole toot, and then Martin Luther King very directly involved in this one as well. Johnson, LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, as the new kind of by default president, has quite a good relationship with King. Also now goes on TV, advocates for a Voting Rights Amendment Act, but also asks, not on TV, but he asks personally King not to march again until all the permits are done and everything. They march partially on Tuesday, the 9th of March. The march is in March, 1965, and they stop, they kneel, and they pray at the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which is essentially the crossing Selma to Montgomery, and nothing happens. It's peaceful because they don't try to cross the bridge. And then, of course, the final actual march, 21 to 24 March, I think it is.
I'd say,
where they start out, I think it's about 2,000, and by the time they actually make it, because now they're protected by the federal government, they make it to Montgomery, Capitol building, and I think they swell up to 20 or 30,000. And what's the outcome? So the outcome of Birmingham and Washington, and arguably the Freedom Summer, is the passing of the Civil Rights Act, which is huge. Basically, it says black people are equal, and in every aspect, in society and everything, massive. And then Selma Montgomery marches culminates in the Voting Rights Amendment Act, and all of it, as you said, is using the media, publicity, sympathy from the population, and ultimately pressure to change laws. And it is successful in changing laws, very successful in changing laws, and it's all done peacefully. And that wraps that.
That's about it.
We can go into Black Power, call it a wrap. Anything else to add? What did we make? Was it a record?
47.
That's fine. I think our previous longest was 46. We're good.
All right.
Call it a day.